Hello BookTube, it's Ben here from the History Fellow channel. I'm here today with a excuse me. Here today with a book tag, and this week's book tag is the mid-year book Freakout tag, which is quite a bit of an apt title because you suddenly then realise, oh hang on, the year's already half over, so it's kind of not good in that way, but after having spent so much time looking forward to the new year coming and spring and that, and suddenly we're on summer already. So first of all, if you can hear some whirring in the background, I apologise. It's just that the Muppet that lives next door has decided he's going to do his hedge today, so of course, typically when I've got a video to make, he's out there making a noise and doing his hedge again. But anyway, I think he's far enough down the hedge to where you probably can't hear the noise very well anyway. But anyway, let's get on with the book tag. The mid-year book Freakout tag. First question, best book you've read so far in 2022? Right, typically I thought I'd find out all the books for all the questions, so that I've got visual, I can show you which books I do like. And typically it's the first book and question that I can't find the book to. Now I'm not sure where it is, but I can only think I've packed it in one of my book boxes because I'm planning on moving my books around a bit to make it more organised and that sort of thing. But the book I'm picking for this year so far is the book about, I did a couple of videos on it. It was about the Titanic, and basically it was by a book about the Titanic from Pen and Sword Books, and it looked at all the reasons for why the Titanic sank, from the rivets it used, the metal it used, the cost-cutting exercises, and the fact that most of the staff that were sailing on the Titanic were all like new to the ship and kind of didn't really know where things were and about emergency drills or how to use the lifeboats and things like that. So I just found that book really informative. I really enjoyed the way it was written, how it just looked at each individual detail, gave you the reasons and the summaries for each reason as well. I just found that the way it was written, it was quite informative and quite enjoyable. And I think it only took me sort of like 6 or 7 hours to read, but it was a really good book. So that was that one about the facts of the Titanic. Question 2, best sequel you've read so far in 22. You don't really get sequels for in non-fiction. It tends to be if there's a particular part of that subject you like, you're more likely to concentrate on that book. But there isn't really many sequels, and certainly none that I've read this year so far. So number 3, a new release you haven't read yet but want to. There's a book, I think it's on 14th century London, being published in the second half of this year, by Pen and Sword Books, and it looks like it's a nice chunky book. And I'm really getting quite into learning more about the history of London and England and this country as a whole, that sort of thing. So I'm really looking forward to that one, and but it's been written by a good author as well. So I really hope that's going to be good, and hopefully one of my books of the year. So that's London in the 14th century, I think it's called. So if I get a chance to review a copy of that, I'll make sure I show it on a video and do a book review. Number 4. Most anticipated release for the second half of the year, which is kind of really more or less the same question that I've just answered anyway. So I'll go on to number 5. Biggest disappointment. That was quite easy. Now I quite enjoy books about famous companies or companies that you know of. I find it quite interesting to read how it was set up, how it was built, how it achieved its success, and the products it decided to sell and that sort of thing. And I quite like those little ones about, you know, how a business goes. But the book, I thought I'd like this one. The book is called A History of Triang and Lines Brothers Limited, the rise and fall of the world's largest toy manufacturing company. Now I'll put that down now because I don't really like talking about negatively about books. But it was just a bit long. It was a little bit boring, a bit. If you imagine a book written by an accountant or a bookkeeper, it's, you know, it's just, it just wasn't that interesting really, and it was a bit of a hard slog. So that's kind of like my disappointment for the year. Biggest surprise was, that refers back to my first book of these questions about the Titanic. I kind of just thought, I'll just review this book off to review it by chance. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, and that was kind of my biggest surprise, because I've read on the subject of the Titanic many times before, and it's kind of it's a bit like the JFK, you know, things, when you just keep reading the same thing sort of thing, it gets a bit boring, or I've read that before, I won't bother. But it was a really good book, I really enjoyed it. And that was my biggest prize of the year so far. Favourite new author? That would be Samuel de Court. I think he's a Dutch writer. He's written the 614th Tank Destroyer Battalion, Fighting on Both Fronts, published by Pen and Sword Books. And it's basically about the first black tank company in the Second World War, because of, obviously they were all black, they had to suffer the racism and that from those people in charge and fellow white soldiers and that sort of thing. But of course, because they had to suffer all this racism and discrimination, it kind of made them work harder, and they kind of became such a good tank battalion that they achieved many awards and distinctions, and they just showed that, you know, they showed everybody how good they were, and they did earn the respect of fellow white soldiers and those that were in charge. So the story is impressive, but I really like the way Samuel writes. I've read another book before, I think it was on the Dutch resistance, so I would certainly read more books of his. His name is Samuel de Court. If you get a chance to read him or read his books, then they're highly recommended. Number 8, newest fictional crush. That obviously doesn't apply to me, but because I don't read fiction, but I can change it slightly and say I've been reading more about the Navy, naval battles recently, and so sort of the war in the Pacific. So I'm really enjoying them, reading about the subject, some of the books. I'm just about to start actually this one tonight, which is the Great Naval Battles of the Pacific War. And I'm just really looking forward to it. It should be good. And I don't know why I haven't read so much before about the Navy, but I'm getting quite into it, and it's really interesting. Number 9 is newest favourite character. There's not really, there are characters in history and that, but we'll avoid that one because it's based really around if you read fiction. Number 10, book that made you cry. Well, I haven't cried at all, but I have read quite a few Holocaust books. I find them very hard to read because they're just, I mean, honestly, who wants to read about millions of people being made to suffer and die, and the way they were tortured and killed is just incomprehensible. It's important for people, I believe, to read about the Holocaust in an attempt that sort of thing doesn't happen again. And people need to be made aware of how humans have behaved in the past. So, although I've read a few books, they haven't made me cry, but they are very, very sad and hard books to read. So, any books about the Holocaust, in my opinion, are hard to read. A book that made you happy. I'm going to say the books I've been reading about the American Navy and War in the Pacific are really good books I'm finding. And the other one I enjoyed, it kind of made me happy, but there's a book called The House of Tudor and Its Grisly History, written by Mickey Mayhew and published by Pen and Sword Books. Now, what was really good about this was there's a series of books called Horrible Histories, which is aimed at getting kids and teenagers into history. And that's a bit like, all the gory and the gross bits of history, and it writes about, because that's what kids and young people like. This is a bit like the adult version, in that you've got the history of the Tudors and all the bad things that they did and got up to and what happened to them and that sort of thing. And it goes through all the gory bits in like short snippet chapters. So, I mean, each chapter's like, it's only 4 or 5 pages long. But that snappiness of going through the book, and as it was well written by Mickey Mayhew, thoroughly enjoyed the book. And it's a book you can dip in and out. Or I think it took me just an evening, maybe 2, to read. It was thoroughly interesting. Number 12, most beautiful book you've bought so far this year. I don't really buy beautiful books. As far as I'm concerned, every book is a good book. And I'm happy to read any book, and it's a bit like receiving a present, every book you get, as far as I'm concerned. And last question, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? Well, I counted up before, and I have a TBR list of about 35 books. So I've got plenty of reading to do over the summer. They all need to be read sort of in the next month or 2. And I need to get started on them. Although I'm always reading 2 or 3 books at a time anyway. But I do need to get started on them, because I've got at least another dozen coming. So I do need to get me backside in gear. There we go, that's all 13 questions. So thank you very much. If you've managed to make it this far, thank you very much for watching. If you found the video of interest, please feel free to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe and tell your mates, or share it if you want. That's more than welcome, and it is highly appreciated. So thank you very much for watching. Please make sure you all stay safe and well. And I shall see you very soon for another video.